Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another fantastic edition of a Sitback with Shaq and Anu. We're coming to you live on Channel 1 on Dialogue TV and, of course, on our PodHub platforms on YouTube. Every day, Monday to Thursday, every week, we have a fantastic guest on the show to talk about different topics in Sri Lanka. Topics that are trending at the moment in Sri Lanka is what we've been doing, and we've had some fantastic guests on the show as always. And today we have another wonderful guest on the show. We've got Bradley Emerson. Bradley, good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Shaq. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. We're going to have so many questions that we obviously have to ask, and of course Bradley has been the head of the public-private partnership in Sri Lanka when it was launched. He's also a turnaround strategist, and we're going to be talking to him as to exactly how he feels that we can actually turn Sri Lanka around from the economic crisis that we have at the moment. So lots to ask Bradley, and of course you also have the opportunity of sending in your questions. The number is going to be appearing on your screen, and you can send in those questions if you whatever you have as far as questions are concerned for Bradley. You can send it in to us. Unfortunately, Anu is under the weather. Spoke to me this evening and he really doesn't sound good at all. So Anu, if you're watching, I hope you have taken some strong medicines, and we know what your strong medicines can be. Have rest, and then we can obviously have you back on the show on Monday. As always, we're going to start off with our daily poll on the show, and a chance for you to be a part of the daily poll like you have always been. Let's have the poll on your screen right after this. All right, we have our daily poll for the show today, and clearly with all the political instability that Sri Lanka has been going through the last couple of days, we have a president now who's been elected, the 8th executive president in Sri Lanka, and this is the poll for you. Has a light emerged at the end of the tunnel with the new president? Yes or no? Has a light emerged at the end of the tunnel with the new president? Of course, the country is divided at the moment. What do you think? Yes or no? WhatsApp your answer 077 669 1590. Has a light emerged at the end of the tunnel with the new president? Yes or no? And your number, of course, to WhatsApp the answers 077 669 1590. I think that's a really good question for us to actually kickstart this conversation, Bradley. Has a light emerged at the end of the tunnel with the 8th executive president in Sri Lanka, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe?
I hope so, as long as it is not from a train coming towards us. Yeah, there is hope, but unfortunately hope is not a strategy.
Hope is not a strategy. Unfortunately, hope is something that everyone thinks is a strategy, and holding on to it is the last straw. But now things, we feel the last couple of days, slowly settling down. Things are, it's like the dust is settling, but very slowly. Where are we going from this point onwards?
So, good thing about this being done with is that there is some sort of political stability that is seen the world was looking for, that should actually help people to start communication with whoever the donors and other agencies are. So that communication can start, and to that, in that direction there is some openness that has come through, yes. But in my view, Shaq, we have come here because we are burdened with debt.
Right.
4 decades, if you look back, we had negative balance of trade. We had negative deficit budgets, and we always borrowed to
settle,
to meet the gap.
Right.
To meet the gap. So if you have been living on debt for 40 years, both foreign and local, where we are today is not a surprise to me.
Right.
Right. And no wonder we have been to IMF 16 times since independence.
Right.
16 times.
16 times.
So we are basically regular customers to those institutions. So where do you go from here? My personal perspective is that you cannot pull out a ship that is drowning out of debt by more debts. There are enough case studies of countries that have gone through what is happening, what happened post-COVID. Nearly 60% of the countries, the world's nations have defaulted on their debts. So there is a lot of restructuring happening. But ending up bankrupt is a different place to start with. But Sri Lanka is what? It was an $84 billion economy. Now it has contracted to about 78. That Shaq is about half of Philips.
Right.
Right. In terms of balance sheet size.
Right.
So if Philips can turn around Sri Lanka with so much of resources built in this country, in my perspective, it can be turned around.
That's the question now. How do we get the economy on track? Because obviously the cries out there for the common man is the fact that he just wants 3 meals on his table.
Yeah.
And they're not looking at lavish lifestyles. I mean, this is a conversation, I think last evening, Lihini was here on the show, and we urban folk always concentrate the fact that the country is just urban. Mm-hmm. We always tend to forget the rural folk out there who don't need a lavish lifestyle, who can get about. They don't have any issues if there's no fuel or not, because they've got ways of getting about.
Absolutely.
They live in a very small environment, know each other, but they are the drivers of this nation, which we don't necessarily see.
Yeah.
Now, when they start suffering, everybody starts suffering.
Yes.
Classic example with the fertilizer issue that we had with the farmers. They started suffering, and look where we are right now.
Absolutely.
Right. So how do we get the economy back on track?
Right, Shaq. Put it very simply, what is an economy? Economy is purchase power.
Right.
Buying power is economy. So if you see the moment you reduce the buying power, the economy contracts. Most of the countries at which have been branded as developing, there is a massive piece which is called the rural economy, which is called the small and medium economy. And if you don't nurture that in a planned manner, you're bound to come to where we are. Now, if you talked about agriculture, if you just look at, it has been around 9 or less than 9% of GDP 30-40 years ago.
Right.
And what do you expect that economy to do when you are talking about the world's essentials, which is food? It's been neglected.
Right.
Your point is right. Rural sector has now started to feel the pinch because of their means of income has got affected because of the absence of fertilizer. So it's a strategic blunder that we made, not knowing that there is a phase.
What kind of strategic blunder? Can you make a strategic blunder? It's a blunder. Strategically, you can't make a blunder, can you?
We do strategic blunder because it came as a strategy to introduce.
If you look at it like that, yes.
It came as a strategy to become the only nation which does organic farming.
Yeah.
That was a strategy.
Right.
And then it was a blunder. That's why I called it strategic blunder.
Right.
It happens in Sri Lanka, right? If you can do that. So if you didn't know the phase out, if you just go back to JR's time, 1977-78, the accelerated Mahaveli scheme. He wanted to accelerate it because he wanted to finish it off during his tenure.
Right.
The consequence of accelerating, we had massive droughts.
Right.
I don't know whether you were around at that time. We built the dams, there was no water.
Right.
Because they cut the trees down, there was no replanting, and there was no rain, and there was no water in the dams. And there was, at that time, people who were in that time will know, there was a risk of dams cracking.
Right.
Right? So if you don't stretch things out, these are things, there is a gestation period for things. There is a period that you have to plan it out. The Mahawali was planned out over 15 years. So that you cut from one end, you plant from the other end, so that there is the eco balance is there.
Right.
So this is what I say strategic blunder. So that's strategy to accelerate and get it done, but there is no water to distribute.
Right.
So you got to understand, we have to live with nature. And if you miss that connect, you know what's happening with all these fires that's going around. We will lose out on pure survival. The point that you said, we urban folks think Colombo is Sri Lanka, which has been unfortunately the perspective in the last 20-30 years, after CIMA particularly, because the agriculture was the way forward in her economic strategy.
Right.
We have come to a point where urban is city, urban is development, urban is economy. Now we have been proved wrong.
Exactly.
Because we've forgotten the fundamentals, the base of an economy.
Right.
Starts at that level.
So now if you're basically looking at the recovery process, is what we're talking about also. We feel that we've hit rock bottom, but economists and analysts say it's going to get worse. You can't possibly go below rock bottom, right? But that's all we hear. It's going to get worse. Things are going to be difficult. I think the numbers of inflation actually came out just, I think maybe like 2 hours before we actually started the show. Headline inflation increased to 58.9% in June 2022 from 45.3% in May 2022. So clearly it's been going up. And it's going up at an alarming rate, so to say. Don't know where it's actually going to stop. But one thing is the fact that everybody just says that it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. Inflation is going to go up. Cost of living is going up. People are going to be losing jobs. SMEs need to basically shut down. What are you doing about it?
Yeah.
What's the point of saying it's going to get worse and telling people to go sit in a corner and cry about it? What are you doing about it?
Absolutely. So Shaq, very valid point. What we are hearing is about things are getting worse is that we are still not experienced the full impact of us hitting the rock bottom.
Thanks for that wonderful news.
We haven't really yet felt the real impact of, because we have never experienced recession.
Right.
We don't know. Tsunami came, some people didn't even know how to spell that word. Tsunami.
Right.
It came, it hit, then only you knew what it was. It went.
Right.
It went. In 3-4 days it went. But this is big. We have seen recessions in countries like Venezuela, Greece. We have seen them hitting the rock bottom. But all these countries are now turning back, turning around. So to ask, what do we do? Why do you want to miss a good crisis?
Okay.
Crisis will come, crises have come, and we are in the midst of it. So when you are in a crisis, you have to rise within the crisis.
Right.
So there are 3 stages in managing crisis. First level is survival. So that is a different set of strategy to survive. Second is revive. Only at 3rd level you thrive. So right now, what do we do now? So how do we survive? Now, if you ask me, if I take it from a corporate perspective and say, okay, what do we do if a company has hit rock bottom? The first thing you need to look at is, what opportunities do I have that I can capture from where I am?
Right.
That's your starting point. If you are looking at your rock bottom because your expenses are higher than your income, the first thing you do is, where do I reduce my expenditure? So that's your starting point. So these are kind of questions you need to ask when you're looking at how do I turn around my economy. So what has brought us down here? We were spending more than we were earning. So how do we first put a ceiling on that?
Right.
And then look at how do you generate revenue. I told you before, you can never come out of a situation that is caused by debt by creating debt. Because whether you print money or whether you borrow, if you do that for consumption, Shaq, we are not going to come out of it.
Yeah.
Right. During recession, money gets printed.
Right.
Even the US prints it. But some portion of that needs to go into oiling the economy.
Production, so to say.
Production. If you are oiling the economy, if you don't do that, your buying power comes down. The moment buying power comes down, everything stops.
Right.
The guy who are producing will not produce because he can't sell, because there is no one to buy.
Right.
So that's what I said, economy is buying power. So where do we start is how do I feed into those little economies? How do I oil them up? How do I bring revenue into this country?
Right.
That is the first question when you are looking at a company. If I want to bring this around, if you're broke as a company, what do? I have to bring income.
Right.
So your question is, what do we do? Let's look at income, revenue streams.
Now you obviously have big companies who can possibly survive, revive, and thrive on their own. But what is going to be the biggest hit are the SMEs.
Yeah.
So like you said, in terms of, production, oil the economy, do you not feel the SMEs are the ones that actually need to be oiled at the moment?
Absolutely, Shaq. 60-65% of our economy comes from the small and medium sector.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, in difficult times, banks see them as high-risk segment.
Considering that obviously there's over 60% that's actually contributing.
So they will tend to pull out.
Right.
So if you pull out the funding to 60% of the economy, you are putting risk on yourself. There is literature to say why banks crash in recession is because they neglect the majority component of the drivers of an economy.
Right.
Obviously, in recession, in inflation, central bank will push the rates up.
Right.
In recession, government will print money, they will borrow, which will push the rates up. But how do we keep a cap on the net interest margins? How do you create a fund to support the small and medium industries? You are talking about inflation going up to 58%. Inflation going up by 0.75% in the US. They are talking about relief for small and medium industries.
Right.
Because they know what runs the economy. So if you don't understand the drivers of the economy and ensure those are restarted or oiled to start getting the wheels moving, we will never get out of this. But it comes down to how do we make revenue?
How do we finance the recovery? Considering the fact that we don't have finances, we need to recover, which is obviously at the end of the day, I mean, there's also clearly, you know the saying that you need to spend money to make money.
Absolutely.
We don't have money to spend.
Right.
How are we supposed to make the money?
Interesting, Shaq. Now, we have heard so much about IMF. Heard so much about bailouts.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I've been a banker in my life, so there are so much of restructuring that happens with clients. Now, first thing for IMF to even look at any sort of bailout or aid, or number one, they will want our loans to be sustainable. Now, what does that mean? We have a current commitment around $6 billion a year repayment. $6 billion. And we all know we don't have the revenue stream for that.
For sure.
Right. So we need to go back to our lenders and say, okay, can I pay you $3 billion a year, $2 billion a year? And he's going to ask you, show me the revenue. When that is done, IMF will looking at some bailout funds. Why? Because they don't want you to borrow from IMF and settle loans.
Right.
They want that money to go into what I mentioned to you is recycling, or rather energizing the economy.
Right.
So that is where the money will come from. They will insist on cutting down on expenditure. They will insist on prioritizing state-owned enterprises being not managed, because to me, Shaq, the business of the government is not government of businesses. You have to limit yourself to policy.
Right.
Right. So these are things that IMF will insist on. These are the way states should be run. So we have no choice but to find revenue. I keep coming back to this whole equation of we have to find ways of getting revenue. We are only talking about borrowing from this country, country A, country B, World Bank, IMF, for mercies.
Right.
You cannot rise by burdening yourself with more loans.
And it looks like, of course, we're obviously borrowing money, like you said, purely for consumption, right? So you're eating the money that you're borrowing, and obviously there's nothing coming out of that. So clearly, you're looking at a certain proportion. At least, yes, obviously it is for consumption because there's the survival mode right now. But then there is also amount that we need to look at in producing.
Exactly.
Make good use of that money, right? But one thing that you just actually did touch on at the moment is the state sector. Now, we obviously have a massive issue with our fiscal policy, right? We have a massive, I mean, it's out in the open, right? We have state sectors that are just overburdened with heads, with unfortunately, nothing's happening at the end of the day, and we as taxpayers are absorbing the debt over and over again. Now, the president at the moment, this is something. It is a political. What's the right word? I mean, it's not a political suicide of sorts, but it's a really tough political pill to swallow to cut your fiscal policy. Will he do it, even though he has to do it?
He will have no choice, right? If you are looking at the country's income expenditure gap, it runs into billions.
Yeah.
Right. You need to find out where the waste is.
We all know where the waste is.
That's right. You know where the waste is. We know the consequence of carrying this waste. Then what do? You need certain situations need a surgery. They're beyond strategy. So if you have to amputate, you have to amputate. If you want to protect the life of that patient, if you have to cut off a limb, so be it. But whether you have that strength to do that, because at the end of the day, all these, Shaq, we all know, have been used as vote buying mechanisms.
Exactly.
Right. Let's face it. We all know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So every corporate or every state sector has been a machinery to give jobs, not create jobs, to give jobs which are not there.
Right.
Which means it doesn't add any value to the company, but the company or the enterprise is incurring expenditure, and it has massively grown. Take Sri Lanka Railway, 10 billion a year. 10 billion a year. But you mentioned about my being in the PPP. The PPP had a proposal to modernize the railway stations.
Right.
Right. And that just 5 railway stations. Slave Island, Kolpiti, Bambalapitiya, Vellavatta and Dehiwala. That would have given a net revenue to the government, Sri Lanka Railway, of 600 million a year.
By modernizing them?
Just modernizing them.
How would that work?
Yes, okay. So the model is, if you look at a Delhi railway station, for example, it becomes a commercial center.
Right.
So you have your shopping malls, your parking slots,
right.
your buy-in supermarkets, walk-in supermarkets.
Right.
You convert it to a parking slots, build it up,
right.
You make money. So there is a revenue model. If you look at what has happened in India, the Delhi railway station and certain tracks, they're all like malls.
Right, like mini hubs.
Mini hubs. So
right.
you do that, and then you get revenue out of that. So we had potential projects like that.
So why didn't it go through?
See, one of the reasons why we are here is because we don't have political coherence. It went down here. You talked about vote base. I don't mind mentioning names because it happened. The Minister of Megapolis at that time, I took this proposal to him. First I had to convince the railway why you should do this. When we took it to that location, the response that was given to me was unbelievable. He said, we are going to regain the sea up to Mount Lavinia.
Wow, okay.
So wait until that is done to do this railway project. This is the very words I was told. And you know what happened when we regained some land in Mount Lavinia a couple of months ago?
Yeah.
It didn't last even 2 weeks.
Right.
Right. So that's the kind of fantasy world that our people live in. They're far from reality. And then when we have real opportunities like this are brought up to create revenue, you come up with some fantasy and then say, okay, this is what I imagine I will do. And then we don't. So now the reality has struck everybody, hopefully. So you're going to open up and see how come I can generate revenue. End of the day, Shaq, if you want to recover a company or an economy, if you look at all the case studies, Indonesia, Vietnam, Italy, now Venezuela, Greece, Spain, those are case studies.
Right.
It's about revenue generation and expenditure reduction.
Right.
So those are fundamentals. So we need to get that message across to people who are currently looking at regaining or reviving the Sri Lankan economy. First, you got to do what you have to do to survive.
Right.
You have to have 3 meals. Even if you don't have to have 3 meals for the next 1 year, okay, make sure you have 2 meals. But what do you do in that 1 year to ensure you get the 3rd meal on the 2nd year? You can't hope for it. You got to make revenue.
Okay, so now tourism sector clearly was massively impacted because of the pandemic that we went through. I think we, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, we were massively impacted, much more than any other country. We're still finding it difficult to lift our heads up because we had sequence of issues. It started with the pandemic, but obviously we had sequence of issues which just is not helping it to come out. Now we're talking about production, we're talking about reviving. Tourism is there. I mean, it's there. You know, there is nothing for you to construct. We have a blessed island with so many different destinations. We've got fantastic hotels all over the island. It's there. What can we do to revive that? I mean, it's there, Bradley.
Yeah.
Somebody just needs to basically tap them and say, get up. How do we do this?
See, Shaq, interesting. And I don't know whether you know, in 2016 and 17, FT UK identifies Sri Lanka as the #1 island economy.
Right.
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 So we have lost that. So tourism has got affected. It has affected so many economies. Dubai.
Yeah.
Right. 2008 crisis. It got affected. It was Emirates Airline that came along with the Dubai tourism to bring that back. We have lost it out. And same, Singapore, when SARS hit them,
Right.
the entire economic collapse, people were not traveling, the tourism got affected. All the hotels got together with Singapore Airlines and they cut the prices down. I think it's about 10,000 rupees for 2 nights and per person. That's the price that they sold the ticket for.
Wow. Okay.
And to get the people into the country,
Right.
to get the creator habit. Now what do? We talk of tourism, Shaq. We look at tourism the way we looked at tourism 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. We look at the segment that you want to bring in. Things are at 30 years ago, but things have happened. The habits have changed, lifestyles have changed, the strata of the demographics have changed, economic power bases have shifted. So who is a tourist now? What do people tour for? Now virtual realities have been created.
Right.
So what do you people tour for? That is what you need to understand. If 70% of the people chooses destination based on political stability.
Right.
That is, it's in World Tourism Organization publication, top of the line. It says 70% of the people chooses on. So we have lost that trick. So you said repeatedly things have happened. We have lost it. But what can we do for tourism? The world is aging. There is a concept called medical tourism. You would be shocked if I give you some data, Turkey has 2,000 tourists a day only to do hair replanting.
Wow.
2,000 tourists.
A day.
Right, a day just for that. So this whole concept of medical tourism, because the world is aging, is an opportunity we can touch for. Before we come in there, you said West, Shaq, West is going into recession, and the projected contraction till 2025 is about 4.6%. So that economy is going to go down.
Right.
Where is the growth? Growth is in the East.
Right.
The East is exact opposite. They are expecting to grow between 4.6% to 6%.
Wow.
In the Eastern Bloc.
Right.
So where is your market for tourism?
Right.
Take Bangladesh. Bangladesh is projected to become first world by 2040. So that's the next Singapore story.
Right.
So what does that mean? Means your income goes up, your lifestyle changes, you will travel. Is Bangladesh in our target market for tourism?
They should be.
This is what I say is planning.
Okay.
So when you are going in for tourist market, you must know where is my market. What do people travel for? You'll be surprised if I tell you the top countries. Do you want to guess what is the most popular country for health tourism? Orthopedic surgery and cardiology. Don't you have people here who can do that?
So you feel that health tourism is something that needs to be tapped in this country and that hasn't been tapped?
We have never marketed health tourism. We market wellness tourism. It's different, Shaq.
Right.
Right. When our currency is weak, what can we do? Make it affordable for people to come.
Right.
There are tested models that have had currencies at low level, which has built economies. If you go back to the whole Japanese industrial revolution, how they became a powerhouse post-war, you'll be surprised to know in 1968, a US dollar was 5 Sri Lankan rupees.
Wow, good old days.
Good old days. At the same time, a US dollar was 360 yen. So we are there at the moment.
Right. Yeah, we're there at the moment.
Right. So they created the trade between, at that exchange rate, they made their vehicles, their technology cheap for US. And 71, they had a 2.9 billion positive trade balance with the US alone. Now you're asking me, our currencies are weak, we are down at rock bottom, what can we do? You make medical tourism cheap for people.
Right.
But it cannot be done in isolation.
Right.
You have to get the state hospital, let's say dental, a single tooth implant in Singapore will cost you 2,700 Sing dollars.
Wow.
They can come here on a holiday.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. But you can't do this, just like what Emirates did, just like what Singapore Airlines and the hotels of Singapore did. You must get the Dental Institute of Sri Lanka, hotels together, Sri Lankan Airlines together, and then market health tourism. You can't do this in isolation, and then the government must come in and regulate the pricing. You know what happened to the COVID testing? The testing was available from 4,000 rupees to 13,000 rupees.
Right.
So you can't do that. So if you want to make it cheaper, I think the government hospitals should capitalize it. Tie up with the hotels, selected hotels. But only thing is you have to keep the 3M factor out of this.
The 3M factor.
The 3M factor. It's not the 3M brand. It's me making money factor.
Right.
That has to be out because the country has to make money.
Right.
So this is one example, Shaq. There is massive opportunity right now. With people are getting sick, people are aging, people want to look good, look younger. Sri Lanka has a massive. If you ask me, this will be one of my top of the strategic boxes
But Bradley, we don't even have money to buy, medicine for people living here.
Exactly. That is because we don't have revenue. That is because, so we need to show the IMF, it's a project lending.
Right.
Here is my revenue stream. Lend me for this. You are just like bringing back a bank or financing a company that have gone down. So when you come to the bank will ask, okay, show me your revenue stream. I will finance that. So we need to have people going up to IMF and saying, give me money to buy petrol, give me money. Here's my value proposition. Here is my revenue stream. This is my marketing strategy. Give me money. Or underwrite my borrowing to another company.
So where are we with the IMF at the moment? We're still at staff level discussions, but IMF, I think, are still basically requesting, there is no concrete plan in,
Yes.
revenue in terms of paying the debt.
Revenue.
So because we don't have a way of showing revenue for the bailout.
So bailout will come, Shaq, as I mentioned, only when your loans are sustainable.
Right.
What do I mean by that? That you should be able to pay your loans.
Right.
You should be able to pay your loans. Right now, we have a commitment of about 6 billion a year.
Right.
We have no revenue. Even if I say I'll pay 2 billion a year, I must show here's where the revenue is coming from. So the equation comes down to whether it's a bailout or otherwise, you have to stand on your own sooner or later.
Right.
You have to make money flow in. Tell me how.
And we have no plans?
So there are things that you can do. I just gave you one example.
Right.
I can throw another example to you. Agriculture. We have had less than 9% GDP contribution for I think 20 years. And Sri Lanka is a country which has about 1/3 of our land is arable land. And our land is so blessed. Anything will grow anywhere.
Yeah.
The world is, with the climate change, with the COVID, production has gone down, the world is heading for starvation. As of now, they say about 3 million people are starving. So now Sri Lanka is small, yes, but agriculture, we have about 2 million people in agriculture, which is about 10% of our population.
Right.
But what do we do with that? Can agriculture, we are not a massive land mass, but can we do something about agriculture? Why don't you propose or promote a concept called Grow in Sri Lanka?
Okay.
Right? So you invite the countries like the Gulf countries which have money, which have no food, to come and start growing in Sri Lanka for your own consumption or export.
Interesting.
But give me 30% of your production. What will happen? Technology will come. They will bring the money. They will bring the fertilizer. This is all about picking one revenue line, identify what will drive that revenue line, what will sustain that driver, tick them off. And these are just off the cuff ideas that I am throwing at you. Dubai is spending $2 billion in India to create agri-farms.
Right.
Because they want money, food to come.
So they are basically funding the whole thing for themselves.
Or export.
Or export it.
Or export. Another very simple idea. So India is a massive consumer market. Massive consumer market. Now I know when I was at PPP, certain institutions, international institutions, was trying to set up production centers in and around Hambantota, simply to cater to India.
Right.
Because of proximity.
Right. Easy access.
That's a massive consumer market, and they are, I think, they are ahead of UK in terms of economy. The world is investing only in India. Singapore has decided to invest only in India. So when you have such a massive market up there, why don't you ask someone who is exporting to India from, let's say, Vietnam or Singapore, set up your factory here.
Right.
Only to supply to India.
Right.
So there are, the thing is this, Shaq. experience brings old solution to new problems. If you look at the collective experience of our parliament, nothing personal to anybody.
They don't have solutions.
Their solutions won't fit into the problem.
Right.
The problems are new. So agriculture, health tourism are revenue streams.
Right.
Because our tea plantation, what is our... Now, I was reading this report. They said Indian yield per hectare is much, much weaker than Sri Lanka. Because of the land mass,
Right.
they produce more.
Right.
So we have much more yield value in our soil. So what do you do with that?
Interesting. There's actually a question that came up on the screen, Bradley, from Hiran. How will the foreign crisis and exchange rate affect the future of overseas education and obtaining foreign qualifications in Sri Lanka?
Ironical question, because this is the very question I threw at the governor at a recent luncheon meeting.
Right.
And he didn't want to take that question. But this is a very important question, and it's a very serious situation that can crystallize as a crisis.
What do we have? At least about a fair amount of Sri Lankans obviously studying in universities on a yearly basis.
Right. So I think we send about 30,000 people abroad.
Right.
And we have about 100 plus universities which are providing programs on franchise because children can't go. If you look at every insurrection, be it Sri Lanka, be it abroad, who was behind it? Take Bahrain, take Saudi insurrection, there was insurrection, Libya, Lebanon, Sri Lanka, 71, 83. Who? University students.
Right.
Why? Because of lack of opportunity. Now, to answer this question, the suggestion that I made at that luncheon meeting was you should create or allocate certain amount of money for education from the revenue that you're getting. Because if you deprive children from education, you're depriving employment. If you deprive employment, you're setting the foundation for another uprising. So when you go for a bailout, you have to make a compelling case and say, we want this amount of money which we will allocate only for education. That's the answer to the question that came on board. Because if they say, yeah, no plan, we are saying, here's the plan. If you don't educate our children, which is a fundamental right,
Yeah.
UNICEF will support this.
Yeah.
And we say, this money, we will only allocate for education. So it all comes down to how you present your case.
Bradley, now obviously we've got a new president, and a prime minister is going to be elected tomorrow, or appointed tomorrow, so to say. I think some of the cabinet members, cabinet ministers actually are planning on retaining their posts. What is our short-term plan? Clearly we obviously, the country wants to see some sort of progress or some sort of settlement in some way or the other. I mean, honestly, Bradley, last few weeks or so, it's just been tiring. It really has been tiring. I think, someone needs to catch a break somewhere.
So coming back to your question at the opening of this program, are we seeing a light at the end of the tunnel? If I am to respond, I say no.
We're not.
No, because we don't have a plan to generate revenue. We are all talking about bailouts, more loans.
Yeah.
That's not the way out, Shaq. Even for you to bail out, you have to make a loan sustainable. If you don't, the cabinet, whoever who is coming in, if they don't, point number one, Shaq, they have to set aside their political egos. They have to set aside their silo approach and must learn to collaborate. Right? Prime Minister is asking the opposition to collaborate. My appeal to the President is get your cabinet to collaborate. Railway, Sri Lankan Airlines, Medical Health Department, come out with a plan, because all these guys in the cabinet, if I was the President, I would ask them to give me revenue plans. I will ask them to give them how do you cut down budgets? We have gone through this, right? Our CEOs and our boards will tell us, tell me how we are going to cut down 20% of your expenditure.
Probably look, you know individuals who are in the parliament right now. You know what's going on. Are you trying to tell me there is no revenue plan that's actually on the table?
Nothing has been brought to light.
Really?
Nothing has been brought to light. Every conversation I used to follow the discussions, it's all about bailouts, it's all about loans. Go to IMF. We should have gone to IMF earlier. Hello.
Right.
This is the debate.
Right.
We should have gone to IMF. We have gone there 16 times. They know us from a distance.
Good friends.
We are good friends. But
Right.
it's all about, as I said, the new cabinet, in my view, if you want to turn around the economy, the KPI for them, for every minister to say, I'm going to cut down 30% of the expenditure in my ministerial area. I'm going to bring you so much of revenue. The foreign minister, whoever, he should set up individual FDI targets. You think the global economy is suffering, FDI has not grown?
Right.
FDI has grown by 88% from last April to this April.
Wow.
1.8 trillion is the value of FDI. How do you pitch for that? You have to bid. You have to have a business case and bid. 7 months in PPP unit, we had $5.6 billion of work in progress. When the ministers changed, they dissolved the unit.
Right.
The unit was trained by the World Bank. They spent $48,000 to train that unit. And then that's gone because of political ego.
Right.
So this group who's coming in, whoever it is, need to understand, need to be given KPIs, measurable KPIs, and given a timeline by 6 months. These are languages we have heard in our corporate life.
Yeah, that's the thing.
6 months down the line, I need to see you cutting down your expenditure by X percentage. You can't do that, depart. So you need that kind of presidency.
Well, it's going to be very difficult at the moment. I mean, he's also dealing with individuals who's been in parliament for the longest time. Like you said, not necessarily understanding the trend. Because I don't know if it's the right thing to say at the moment, but you really can't teach new tricks to an old dog, can you?
Absolutely.
Right.
So then, good one.
Oh, that's what we have right now.
So what do we do?
What do we do? What do we do?
So you have to change the trick or change the dog.
Yeah, well, we've got an entire kennel here.
Yeah, or change the master.
These
These are tough statements, but I think what you need now in crisis, you need a catalyst. You need a catalyst who has that iron fist, who can tell people, this is what I want.
Do you think the president has that?
I'm not too sure.
I mean,
I'm yet to see.
You worked with him when he was
Yes,
a prime minister. As a prime minister, did he have that?
I think in his time, the period that I was there during the Yapalania, I think he was struggling to get the coalition to collate. Everyone, the example I gave you about this whole equation in the railway.
Right.
I'll give you another equation because you talked about vote basis. You would have heard of Skytran. I'll ask the audience to Google Skytran. Skytran is a capsule transportation, which is an Israeli technology, which is coming up in Dubai. It will be soon in India.
Yeah.
This proposal was brought in by a Sri Lankan American with the money.
With the money.
With the money. This was one of the projects that we had. With the map to cover the entire country. Imagine you get off on a flight from at Katunayaka and you are in Nuvareli in 75 minutes. Go in a capsule through the estates. What more experience do you want to create in tourism?
Right.
What happened? We took it to the mega police ministry. And good idea, but the tuk-tuk drivers will object.
So it stopped there.
I asked a question. So, Mr. Minister, who runs the economy? Parliament or tuk-tuk drivers? Response, it's a vote base. So, do you want to stay in power because of vote base, or you want to make your vote base powerful? in terms of giving them better life. This particular program had a vocational training plan for them. We would have not consumed, this was 2017, right? Then I asked him at least do this in one particular area, let's say Colombo North or Kandy, which is congested.
Right.
Right. Didn't want to even try. The investor was virtually pleading. So much so he went to Dambulla, met the head priest there and said, shall I put this for people to go up to the Dambulla Gala to Udata, shall we put this because Sri Lanka is aging? He was so desperate to demonstrate the value of it.
Right.
So Shaq, we will all, our children will all look like we did when we were young. What is Hong Kong? What is that? What is this? And I think everybody, people who have been in governments since independence, maybe up not until CIMA was government, it's post that, right? And the trade unions which are politicized, the politicians which had personal agendas, everyone is responsible where we are. University students were politicized. They don't go to university to study.
Yeah.
So the way out, Shaq, we have to work hard. Sri Lankans must work hard if you want.
Look, Bradley, the thing is this, right? I mean, it's not the fact that Sri Lankans don't work hard. Sri Lankans do work hard. Sri Lankans are a resilient bunch. But from what you're saying, irrespective of the fact that we work hard, we're just going to be walking into a wall all the time. So why would you want to sit and work hard when you're turned away?
Shaq, when I say work hard, look at our national productivity. Look at the total labor force in this country. How many hours do we work? Take a tuk-tuk driver.
Right.
How many hours does he work?
Right now, almost 3 days in a line.
Yeah, and then he makes more money than...
Exactly,
right,
yeah.
Right. So normally you would drive for about 4 hours.
Yeah.
So if you have 1.5 million tuk-tuk drivers working 4 hours, work the number and see how much of labor lost.
Right.
And we say working hard. What's our national productivity? So we need to move away from, we have made this country lazy.
I think, okay, I understood. I think we definitely made this country lazy because we have this island mentality that's going on. We just sit back and, things will fall into place whenever we obviously want to fall into place. But do you not think the fact that when you don't see results, when you don't basically see results coming from the work that you're desperately trying to do, you automatically fall into that mind frame saying it doesn't matter, it's just there. So how do you expect an individual to keep on pushing the needle when the needle's obviously be pushing him back?
Very valid point, Shaq. So question is, where does it start?
Where does it start?
The tone has to be set at the top. How productive is the policymakers?
And do you not think that this is the best time for us to actually do that?
That's what I said at the beginning of the conversation. Why do you want to miss a good crisis? It has given us an opportunity to reset the entire system. That's what I said. The newly elected president has a huge opportunity to bring that culture of coherence approach to situation and help them to look results oriented. They should be results oriented.
Yeah.
Today you give a budget, you don't achieve your targets, you are given more budgets. I have been in CCM meetings when I was head of PPP unit, and I have seen the lethargy. I have seen senior officers from a state sector telling the Prime Minister, now President, sir, we didn't do it this week, we will bring it tomorrow. And the Prime Minister will say, okay. If it was Mr. Ransinga Premadasa, he would have thrown the file on the fellow's face.
Right.
And he would have inquired after his mother.
Right.
Right. So we need to get that culture in, Shaq. If you want to come out of a crisis, you need to have someone with an iron fist who will do what he has to do. Whichever way the current president has become president, he's president. And he has a huge responsibility. And an opportunity.
Yeah, a great opportunity.
It's a huge opportunity. That's what I said. You should not miss the good crisis. You need to have, Shaq, apart from the policy makers, you need to have what is called a rescue team.
Right.
The ships that sink are not brought up by the same sailors who sank it.
Right.
So I'm sorry. You need to bring a rescue team. You need to have, there is a lot of wealth of knowledge in this country. There are people who are going and consulting. The guy who built the Singapore night safari is a Sri Lankan. The guy who advises the economic resurgence after 2000, one of the guys who advised the Emir of the Emirates is a Sri Lankan. How many Sri Lankans are in economic forums in various countries? We have that skill, we have the capability, we have the competency. The current regime need to pick that and then create what is called a strategic rescue team. Give it to them for 2 years and tell them to come out with a plan and have measurable outputs with deadlines and get your ministers to support these people. A lot of people have come. I know my friend Susantha Ratnayaka was in the government. He didn't last 6 months.
Right.
How many our unit was only 7 months.
Right.
And we were dissolved when we had $5.6 billion worth of projects working progress. And one of the projects we had, there was a South African pension fund with a $4 billion investment. They came and they want to do exactly what I said. They want to do health because they saw health as an opportunity. They wanted to put paying wards in the Castle Hospital, the Lady Ridgeway and the Ragama Hospital.
Right.
Investment paid. So what will happen? This entire health service, the quality of service given to the people would have gone up. Why? People will pay. I mean, you know, if you look at the balance sheets of all the listed companies, how much is all the private hospitals making for a year? Why can't the government make that money? By creating a paid ward inside the hospital premises.
So basically what you're saying, we just got almost about 2 minutes left. Basically what you're saying is almost every project that's been brought up has been blocked by a politician.
Absolutely. I will say it with responsibility. I mean, Shaq, you cry sometimes. This country has so much of potential. And turning an $80 billion economy is not beyond Sri Lankan capabilities.
Right. I mean, I think this is one of the reasons that I suppose the Aragale also wants this set to actually go, because, you know, they've clearly played their role as to where we are right now.
It was structured and strategically blundered to where we are.
Interesting. All right, we're into the final minute or so. I think it's about time for us to reveal the answer. I think Bradley already gave an answer to the poll that he clearly says no. The question was, has a light emerged at the end of the tunnel with the new president, yes or no? And you had to WhatsApp your answer to that number on 077-669-1590. Everybody who's actually watching us on Channel 1 on Dialogue TV have sent in their responses. Everyone who's actually watching us on social media on different platforms have also sent in their responses. This is what you think. 40% say a light has emerged at the end of the tunnel with the new president. 40%, that means 60% basically say exactly what you did. No, nothing's happened at the moment. So we just have to hang around and see how it is. But I suppose you need to give the man some time to sort of, you know, do his work. I suppose it's not something that one person can sort of revive. This is what we've been hearing. You need a team of people. I hope he finds the right team of people to basically, you know,
let them do their job.
And let them do their job, which is the most important thing. Bradley, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat with you as always, and, you know, dig in and find out all those fantastic ideas that you've been talking about. So hopefully we'll see you trying and see if you can actually implement some of the stuff that you actually spoke about, which is clearly the need of the hour. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being a part of the show. Again, a fantastic week of super guests we've had for you right here on Sitback with Shaq and Anu. Like I said earlier on, unfortunately, Anu is under the weather, and hopefully he'll be back with us on Monday, where we have another great guest lined up for you for another week long of interesting subjects that we speak about on trending topics in Sri Lanka. Till then, have yourself a great weekend. We shall speak to you once again on Monday at 10 p.m. Good night.